The airport buzzed with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to their gates, announcements echoing through the crowded terminals, and the hum of rolling suitcases bouncing off tiled floors. Among the sea of faces stood Daniel Harper, a man in his mid-40s wearing a plain navy blue suit that had seen better days. His tie was slightly loosened, and his face carried the faint lines of stress from a long week at work. In one hand, he clutched his boarding pass tightly. In the other, he held a small carry-on bag filled with papers and a laptop. He glanced up at the departure board again, his eyes scanning for Gate 17. His flight to Chicago was scheduled to leave in less than 20 minutes, and Daniel knew he was cutting it close. The meeting waiting for him in Chicago was critical. It could make or break his career. For weeks, he had prepared presentations, crunched numbers, and rehearsed pitches to win over a potential client whose business could bring his company millions. Missing this flight wasn't an option. As he approached Gate 17, weaving between clusters of people, something caught his attention out of the corner of his eye. A frail elderly woman stood near the edge of the seating area, her hands trembling, as she tried to lift a heavy handbag onto the bench beside her. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, but her face showed signs of exhaustion. She leaned heavily on a cane, its rubber tip squeaking softly against the polished floor each time she shifted her weight. On her lapel, a name tag read, Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Daniel slowed his pace, hesitating for just a moment. He glanced toward the gate counter where passengers were already lining up to board. He could hear the agent calling out row numbers, urging people to hurry, but then he looked back at Mrs. Carter. She seemed so small and alone amidst the hurried crowd. Something about her demeanor tugged at him, a mix of vulnerability and quiet dignity. Without thinking too much about it, Daniel stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently, his voice cutting through the noise around them. "Do you need some help?" Mrs. Carter turned her head, her pale blue eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of surprise, followed by gratitude. "Oh, thank you, young man," she replied in a soft but steady voice. "I dropped my bag, and I'm afraid I can't quite bend down like I used to." She gestured toward the floor, where her handbag lay just out of reach. Daniel bent down and picked up the bag, setting it carefully on the bench next to her. It was heavier than he expected, filled with what felt like books or folders. As he straightened up, he noticed how unsteady she seemed on her feet. "Would you like me to help you sit down?" he asked. "That would be very kind," she admitted, with a smile. With Daniel's support, she eased herself onto the bench, exhaling audibly once she was seated. "Thank you," she said again, her tone warm and sincere. "You're a gentleman." Daniel smiled briefly but couldn't shake the nagging feeling of urgency gnawing at him. He glanced toward the gate once more. The line of passengers had grown shorter, and the agent was now checking tickets more quickly. Time was slipping away. Still, there was something about Mrs. Carter that made it hard for him to walk away just yet. "Are you traveling alone?" he asked, trying to sound casual while keeping half an ear on the boarding process. "Yes," she replied, adjusting her scarf. "My family lives nearby, but I've been visiting grandchildren out of state. Now I'm heading home." She paused, looking at him curiously. "And you? You seem to be in quite a hurry." "I have a meeting in Chicago," Daniel explained, running a hand through his dark, slightly graying hair. "If I miss this flight, it'll be complicated." Mrs. Carter nodded knowingly. Work obligations. I understand those all too well." She chuckled softly, though there was a hint of nostalgia in her expression. "When I was younger, I spent many years flying around the world for meetings and conferences. It's exhausting, isn't it?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You must have worked in aviation then?" Her lips curved into a mysterious smile. "Something like that," she said vaguely. Before Daniel could press further, the gate agent announced that the final boarding call for the flight to Chicago was underway. Panic surged through him. If he didn't act fast, he'd lose his chance entirely. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter," he said apologetically, taking a step backward. "I really need to go." No, please don't let me keep you," she interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "I'll be fine here. Thank you for your kindness." Reluctantly, Daniel turned and jogged toward the gate. By the time he reached the counter, however, it was too late. The agent shook her head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, sir, but the aircraft doors are closed. You'll need to rebook for the next available flight." Frustration bubbled inside Daniel as he stepped aside, watching the last few passengers disappear down the jet bridge. He clenched his fists briefly before letting out a slow breath. There was no point in dwelling on what-ifs. Instead, he turned, back toward Mrs. Carter, who was still sitting quietly on the bench. Approaching her, Daniel forced a polite smile. "Looks like we're both stuck here for a while," he said, attempting to lighten the mood. Mrs. Carter tilted her head, studying him with keen interest. "Well then, perhaps we should make the best of it," she suggested. "Tell me, Mr. Harper," he supplied. "Daniel Harper." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Harper," she said warmly. "And since fate has decided to delay us both, why don't we pass the time with conversation? After all, life often rewards those who take detours." Though skeptical, Daniel found himself intrigued by her calm demeanor and cryptic words. Little did he know this brief encounter would set off a chain of events that would alter the course of his life forever. For now, though, they simply sat together, two strangers bound by circumstance, chatting idly as the minutes ticked by. Outside, planes roared into the sky, leaving trails of white against the blue expanse. Inside, the airport continued its endless rhythm, oblivious to the seeds of change being planted in the quiet corner of Gate 17. As the minutes stretched into an hour, Daniel and Mrs. Carter continued their conversation. At first, it was awkward. Daniel wasn't used to chatting with strangers, especially older women he had just met. But Mrs. Carter had a way of putting people at ease. She asked thoughtful questions, listened intently, and responded with warmth that made Daniel feel like he was talking to an old friend rather than someone he'd only known for a short while. "So, tell me, Mr. Harper," she began, her voice smooth and inviting. "What kind of work do you do?" Daniel hesitated before answering. He didn't want to bore her with the details of his job, but he also felt a strange obligation to explain why missing his flight was such a big deal. "I'm in sales," he said finally. "Well, more specifically, I help companies find solutions to improve their operations. Right now, I'm working on landing a major client in Chicago." Mrs. Carter nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds important," she said, "and challenging. Sales can be a tough field." "You're not wrong," Daniel admitted with a rueful laugh. "It's all about building relationships and trust. Sometimes it feels like walking a tightrope. You don't want to push too hard, but you also can't afford to hold back." Mrs. Carter murmured, tapping her cane lightly against the floor. "It's interesting how much of life comes down to balance, isn't it? Whether it's business or personal matters, knowing when to act and when to wait is key." Her words struck a chord with Daniel, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Maybe it was because he'd been so focused on getting to Chicago that he hadn't stopped to consider whether rushing was really the best approach, or maybe it was simply the calm authority in her voice that made him pause and reflect. "What about you?" Daniel asked after a moment. "You mentioned earlier that you traveled a lot for work. What did you do?" Mrs. Carter's lips curved into a faint smile as if she were debating how much to reveal. "Let's just say I spent many years in the aviation industry," she said cryptically. "It was a different world back then. Fewer rules, bigger risks, and endless possibilities." Daniel leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "That sounds exciting. Did you work for one of the airlines?" She chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Something like that," she replied evasively. "But enough about me. Tell me more about this meeting in Chicago. Why is it so crucial?" Daniel sighed, leaning back against the bench. "Honestly, it's everything. This client could bring in millions of dollars worth of contracts. If I don't deliver, my boss will have my head. And honestly, I've worked too hard to let this slip away." Mrs. Carter studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp yet kind. "Pressure can be a powerful motivator," she said, "but it can also cloud judgment. Have you considered that sometimes things happen for a reason?" Daniel frowned, unsure how to respond. He wasn't the type to believe in fate or destiny. To him, success was about planning, effort, and seizing opportunities, not waiting around for some cosmic force to intervene. Still, there was something comforting about Mrs. Carter's perspective, even if he didn't fully agree with it. Before he could reply, a young airport employee approached them, addressing Mrs. Carter directly. "Ma'am, your connecting flight has been delayed due to weather conditions," the woman explained apologetically. "We'll keep you updated, but it might be a while." Mrs. Carter nodded graciously. "Thank you, dear. I appreciate the update." The employee smiled and walked away, leaving Daniel and Mrs. Carter alone once again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The delay meant they were stuck together even longer, and Daniel couldn't decide whether to feel annoyed or grateful. On one hand, he was losing precious time he could have spent rebooking his flight or preparing for his next steps. On the other hand, there was something oddly reassuring about Mrs. Carter's presence. She radiated a quiet confidence that made the chaos of the airport seem less overwhelming. "Well," Mrs. Carter said brightly, breaking the silence, "it looks like we're in this for the long haul. Shall we grab some coffee?" "My treat." Daniel blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," she insisted, rising slowly to her feet with the aid of her cane. "Consider it payment for your earlier kindness. Besides, I could use the caffeine." With little choice but to accept, Daniel helped her gather her belongings and escorted her to a nearby cafe. The line moved quickly, and soon they were seated at a small table by the window, steaming cups of coffee in front of them. Outside, planes taxied along the runway, their engines roaring as they prepared for takeoff. As they sipped their drinks, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Mrs. Carter shared stories from her travels, describing exotic destinations and memorable encounters with people from all walks of life. Daniel found himself captivated by her tales, particularly her account of navigating a snowstorm in Alaska during a business trip decades ago. "It was terrifying," she admitted with a laugh. "But looking back, it taught me the value of patience and adaptability. When you're stranded in the middle of nowhere, you learn to make the best of what you have." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I guess that's true in any situation. It's just hard to remember that when you're caught up in the moment." Mrs. Carter reached across the table, patting his hand gently. "Life has a way of teaching us lessons when we least expect it," she said. "Sometimes the detours lead to the most beautiful destinations." Her words lingered in Daniel's mind long after they finished their coffee and returned to the gate area. By then, the afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting golden hues across the terminal. Passengers milled about, some scrolling through their phones, others chatting animatedly with companions. Despite the delays and frustrations, there was a certain rhythm to the scene, a reminder that life went on, regardless of individual setbacks. They settled back onto the bench. Mrs. Carter pulled out a small leather wallet and retrieved a business card. Handing it to Daniel, she said, "In case you ever need someone to talk to or if you find yourself in need of advice, don't hesitate to call." Daniel accepted the card, glancing at it curiously. It was simple, bearing only a phone number and the words, "Call me if you're ever in need." There was no name, no title, nothing to indicate who she was beyond the woman sitting beside him. "I'll keep that in mind," he said with a grateful smile. "Thanks again. For everything." Mrs. Carter waved off his thanks with a dismissive gesture. "Think nothing of it, Mr. Harper. Helping others is its own reward." They sat in companionable silence for a while longer, watching as new flights arrived and departed. Eventually, Mrs. Carter's connecting flight was called, and she stood up, steadying herself with her cane. "It's been a pleasure meeting you, Daniel," she said warmly, extending her hand. "Take care of yourself." "You too, Mrs. Carter," Daniel replied, shaking her hand firmly. "Safe travels." As she disappeared into the crowd, Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, curiosity, and a hint of unease. He tucked the business card into his pocket, resolving to think about it later. For now, he turned his attention to rebooking his flight, determined to salvage what remained of his trip. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with Mrs. Carter was far from over, and that her parting words carried more weight than he initially realized. Daniel Harper sat alone at gate 17, staring at the empty space where Mrs. Carter had been just moments before. The airport buzzed around him as usual, but for some reason, it felt quieter now that she was gone. He glanced down at the small business, card in his hand, turning it over and over as if expecting hidden details to appear. It was plain, just a phone number and those enigmatic words, "Call me if you're ever in need." He tucked the card into his pocket and pulled out his laptop, trying to focus on rebooking his flight. But his mind kept wandering back to their conversation. There was something about Mrs. Carter's calm demeanor and the way she spoke, as though she carried secrets or wisdom far beyond what met the eye. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that her presence in his day wasn't just coincidence. Still, he reminded himself not to read too much into it. She was an elderly woman who needed help, nothing more. After several frustrating calls with customer service, Daniel managed to secure a seat on the next available flight to Chicago, scheduled for early the following morning. With no other options, he booked a hotel room near the airport and resigned himself to making the best of the situation. As he gathered his things and headed toward the exit, he noticed how dark it had become outside. The late afternoon sun had vanished, replaced by the glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. The short shuttle ride to the hotel gave Daniel time to reflect. He replayed the events of the day in his head, the missed flight, the unexpected encounter, and Mrs. Carter's cryptic advice. Though he didn't want to admit it, part of him wondered if she was right. Could missing his flight have been more than bad luck? Was there something he was supposed to learn from this detour? At the hotel, Daniel checked in quickly and headed straight to his room. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but sleep eluded him. Instead, he paced the small space, thinking about the meeting he was supposed to attend. His boss had already sent a terse email asking for an explanation, and Daniel knew he'd face scrutiny when he finally arrived in Chicago. The pressure mounted, gnawing at his thoughts like a persistent itch. Unable to settle, Daniel decided to take a walk outside. The cool night air refreshed him as he strolled along the dimly lit sidewalks surrounding the hotel. Streetlights cast long shadows, and the distant hum of traffic provided a soothing backdrop. For a moment, he allowed himself to forget about work and deadlines, focusing instead on the rhythm of his footsteps. As he walked, his hand brushed against the pocket of his jacket, reminding him of the business card Mrs. Carter had given him. He stopped under a flickering lamppost and pulled it out again, studying it closely. Something about its simplicity intrigued him. Why would someone like Mrs. Carter carry such an unassuming card? And why had she given it to him? Curiosity got the better of him. Pulling out his phone, Daniel hesitated for a moment before dialing the number. It was late, and he expected to leave a voicemail. To his surprise, the call connected after only 2 rings. "Hello?" came a familiar voice, calm and steady, just as he remembered. "Mrs. Carter?" Daniel asked, startled. "It's Daniel Harper. We met earlier today at the airport." There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a soft chuckle. "Of course, Mr. Harper. I was wondering when you might call." Her response caught him off guard. "You were?" "I gave you my card for a reason," she said simply. "How can I assist you?" Daniel hesitated, unsure how to explain his predicament without sounding desperate. "Well, I'm in a bit of a tough spot," he admitted. "I missed my flight because I stayed to help you, and now I've got a critical meeting in Chicago tomorrow that I'm scrambling to salvage. My boss isn't happy, and honestly, neither am I." Mrs. Carter listened quietly, letting him vent. When he finished, she spoke in a measured tone. "Life rarely unfolds exactly as we plan, does it? But sometimes these interruptions open doors we didn't even know existed." Her words sounded comforting, but Daniel struggled to see how they applied to his situation. "I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not sure what you mean. How does missing my flight help me?" "Perhaps it doesn't directly," she conceded, "but consider this. Every challenge is also an opportunity. You've already shown kindness and patience today. Those qualities will serve you well, especially in moments of difficulty." Daniel frowned, still unconvinced. That's all good. In theory. But I need practical solutions right now, not philosophy. Mrs. Carter chuckled softly. Very well, Mr. Harper. Let me offer you something tangible. Tomorrow morning when you arrive in Chicago, go to the Skylink Lounge at the airport. Ask for Mr. Peterson. He'll be expecting you. Skylink Lounge? Daniel repeated, confused. Who's Mr. Peterson? All will become clear in due time, she replied cryptically. Trust me, Daniel. Sometimes taking a leap of faith leads to unexpected rewards. Though skeptical, Daniel couldn't deny the sincerity in her voice. Okay, he said slowly. I'll do it. Thanks. For whatever this is. You're welcome, she said warmly. And remember, life rewards those who embrace its twists and turns. They ended the call shortly after, leaving Daniel standing under the lamppost with more questions than answers. Who was Mrs. Carter really? And what did she have to do with Skylink Airlines? Shaking his head, he slipped the phone back into his pocket and resumed his walk, mulling over her instructions. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully. Daniel returned to his hotel room, ordered dinner from a nearby restaurant, and tried to relax. Despite his lingering anxiety about the meeting, he found himself oddly reassured by Mrs. Carter's promise. There was something about her confidence that made him believe everything would work out, even if he didn't understand how yet. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, dressed in his suit, and headed back to the airport. The shuttle ride felt longer than usual, each bump in the road amplifying his nerves. By the time he reached the terminal, he was second-guessing whether he should follow Mrs. Carter's advice. What if this was all some elaborate prank? Or worse, what if showing up at the Skylink Lounge only made him look foolish? Still, he reminded himself that he had nothing to lose. After checking in for his flight and clearing security, he made his way to the lounge. The sign above the entrance read, Skylink Executive Lounge, and a uniformed attendant greeted him politely. Good morning, sir, the attendant said. May I assist you? Yes, Daniel replied, clearing his throat. I'm looking for someone named Mr. Peterson. Mrs. Carter sent me. The attendant's expression shifted slightly, though Daniel couldn't tell if it was surprise or recognition. One moment, please, she said, stepping aside to speak quietly into a headset. Moments later, a tall man in a tailored suit approached, extending his hand with a friendly smile. Mr. Harper, I'm Richard Peterson. Mrs. Carter mentioned you'd be stopping by. Daniel shook his hand, dumbfounded. She did? Yes, Peterson confirmed. Please come with me. We have much to discuss. He led Daniel to a private corner of the lounge, where a table was set up with coffee, pastries, and a folder labeled with Daniel's name. As they sat down, Peterson opened the folder and slid a document across the table. Mrs. Carter thought, you might benefit from reviewing this before your meeting. Daniel picked it up cautiously, flipping through the pages. To his astonishment, it contained detailed information about the client he was supposed to meet, insights into their needs, preferences, and potential objections. It was exactly the kind of preparation he'd been scrambling to complete on his own. How did she get this? Daniel asked, his voice tinged with awe. Peterson smiled knowingly. Let's just say Mrs. Carter has connections in high places. She believes in supporting those who demonstrate integrity and determination. Daniel sat back, overwhelmed by the gesture. For the first time since missing his flight, he felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever Mrs. Carter's role in all of this, she clearly had influence, and she had chosen to use it to help him. Thank you, Daniel said sincerely. I don't know what to say. No thanks necessary, Peterson replied. Just make the most of this opportunity. Mrs. Carter has faith in you. As Daniel reviewed the materials, he realized this wasn't just about salvaging a meeting anymore. This was about proving himself, not just to his boss or the client, but to Mrs. Carter, whose belief in him had sparked a chain reaction he couldn't fully comprehend yet. When it was time to board his flight, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't know what awaited him in Chicago, but one thing was certain. His encounter with Mrs. Carter had changed everything. The flight to Chicago felt longer than usual, even though it was only a couple of hours. Daniel Harper sat by the window, staring out at the endless expanse of clouds while replaying the events of the past day in his mind. He couldn't stop, thinking about Mrs. Carter, her quiet confidence, her mysterious connections, and the way she seemed to know exactly what he needed before he even realized it himself. The folder Peterson had given him rested on the empty seat beside him, its contents neatly organized and filled with insights that felt almost too good to be true. As the plane descended into O'Hare International Airport, Daniel's nerves began to creep back in. Despite the valuable information Mrs. Carter had provided, he still had to face the client, a group known for being tough negotiators, and explain why he was late. His boss had already sent 2 more emails since last night, each one terser than the last. Daniel knew he had to deliver results, or else this trip would become a disaster instead of a second chance. After landing, Daniel collected his belongings and made his way through the bustling terminal. He spotted the client's representative, waiting near the baggage claim, holding a sign with his company's logo. For a moment, Daniel considered turning around and running away. It wasn't too late to catch a flight back home, was it? But then he remembered Mrs. Carter's words. Life rewards those who embrace its twists and turns. Taking a deep breath, he approached the representative and introduced himself. "Good morning," Daniel said, forcing a smile. "I'm Daniel Harper. I apologize for the delay. I ran into some unexpected issues, but I'm here now and ready to make up for lost time." The representative, a middle-aged man named Mr. Ellis, gave him a curt nod. "We'll see about that," he replied flatly. "Follow me." They drove to a sleek office building downtown, where the meeting was scheduled to take place. The atmosphere inside was tense, with sharp suits and stern expressions everywhere Daniel looked. As they settled into the conference room, Daniel opened the folder Mrs. Carter had arranged for him. To his relief, it contained not only detailed profiles of the client's preferences but also suggestions for how to address their concerns during negotiations. It was as if someone had handed him a cheat sheet to success. The meeting started off rocky. Mr. Ellis grilled Daniel about the missed connection, clearly skeptical of his excuses. But as Daniel began presenting his ideas, drawing from the folder's notes, the mood shifted. He spoke confidently, addressing each point with precision and anticipating objections before they could arise. The clients exchanged glances, impressed by his preparation and insight. By the end of the presentation, they were nodding approvingly, asking thoughtful questions rather than tearing him apart. When the meeting concluded, Mr. Ellis shook Daniel's hand firmly. "You've given us a lot to think about," he said. "We'll review everything and get back to you soon." Though it wasn't an outright victory, Daniel knew he'd done well. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of pride. Whatever Mrs. Carter had done, it had worked. She hadn't just helped him avoid failure. She'd set him up for success. Later that evening, after checking into another hotel, Daniel sat alone in his room, staring at the business card she had given him. He flipped it over in his hands, marveling at how such a small gesture had led to such a significant outcome. Curiosity burned within him. Who was Evelyn Carter, really? How did she have access to such powerful resources? And why had she chosen to help him? Unable to resist any longer, Daniel picked up his phone and dialed the number on the card. This time he didn't hesitate when the call connected. "Mrs. Carter," he said as soon as she answered. "It's Daniel Harper again." "Ah, Mr. Harper," she replied warmly. "How did your meeting go?" "It went better than I expected," he admitted. "Thanks to you. I don't know how you managed it, but whatever you did, it worked." She chuckled softly. "I told you life has a way of rewarding those who take detours. All I did was give you a little push in the right direction." "A little push?" Daniel echoed incredulously. This was more like a rocket launch. "How did you know so much about the client? About my situation?" There was a pause on the other end, as if she were choosing her words carefully. "Let's just say I've been in your shoes before," she said finally. "And I understand the value of kindness and hard work. When I saw how you handled yourself at the airport, I knew you deserved a chance to prove yourself." Her words left Daniel speechless. He wanted to press further, to demand answers about her identity and her motives, but something stopped him. There was a warmth in her voice, a genuine sincerity that made him trust her, even if he didn't fully understand her. "I can't thank you enough," he said quietly. "But I feel like there's more to this story. Are you involved with Skylink somehow?" Another chuckle, lighter this time. "Perhaps we'll discuss that another day," she replied. "For now, focus on what's ahead of you. You've earned this opportunity, Daniel. Don't let it slip away." Before he could respond, she added, "Oh, and one more thing. If you're ever in town, I'd love to meet you for coffee again. Consider it my way of saying thank you for helping an old woman at the airport." Daniel smiled, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and awe. "I'd like that," he said. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter, for everything." They ended the call shortly after, leaving Daniel sitting in silence. He stared at the business card once, more realizing it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a lifeline, a symbol of hope when he'd needed it most. Over the next few weeks, Daniel threw himself into his work, determined to capitalize on the momentum from the Chicago meeting. True to their word, the client called back with positive feedback, agreeing to move forward with the partnership. His boss, who had been furious about the initial delay, was now singing Daniel's praises, calling him a miracle worker in front of the entire team. But despite the professional triumph, Daniel found himself reflecting more and more on his encounter with Mrs. Carter. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was far more important than she let on. One evening, unable to resist his curiosity, he decided to do some research. Pulling up his laptop, he typed "Evelyn Carter Aviation" into a search engine. What he found shocked him. Page after page of results appeared, detailing the life and career of Evelyn Carter, one of the most influential figures in the history of commercial aviation. She wasn't just connected to Skylink Airlines, she was its founder. Decades ago, she had built the company from the ground up, revolutionizing air travel with innovative strategies and bold leadership. Though she had retired years earlier, her legacy lived on, and her name carried immense weight in the industry. Daniel sat back in his chair, stunned. No wonder she had been able to pull strings and provide him with insider information. She wasn't just a kind stranger at the airport. She was a titan of the business world, someone whose influence spanned continents. Yet she had treated him with nothing but humility and grace, never flaunting her power or demanding recognition. A wave of admiration washed over him, followed by a pang of guilt. He had judged her based on appearances, assuming she was simply a frail elderly woman in need of assistance. Instead, she had turned out to be one of the most remarkable people he'd ever met. That night, Daniel made a decision. He would write her a letter, not just to express his gratitude, but to ask for guidance. If she was willing to share her wisdom, he wanted to learn from her. After all, she had already taught him one invaluable lesson. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to extraordinary outcomes. By the time he finished drafting the letter, dawn was breaking outside his window. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, a reminder that even after the darkest nights, light always returns. Daniel sealed the envelope, addressed it to Mrs. Carter, and resolved to send it the next day. As he prepared for bed, he realized something profound. His missed flight hadn't been a failure. It had been a turning point, and thanks to Evelyn Carter, he was beginning to see life not as a series of obstacles, but as a journey full of possibilities. Daniel Harper mailed the letter to Mrs. Carter a few days later, feeling both nervous and hopeful. He didn't know if she would respond or even read it, but writing it had been cathartic. Pouring his thoughts onto paper helped him process everything that had happened. The missed flight, the unexpected encounter, and the way Evelyn Carter had transformed his life in ways he never could have imagined. Weeks passed without a reply. Daniel threw himself into his work, channeling his energy into building stronger relationships with the Chicago client and proving himself to his boss. The partnership flourished under his leadership, earning praise from everyone involved. His career was finally on an upward trajectory again, and for the first time in years he felt confident about his future. Still, part of him couldn't stop wondering about Mrs. Carter. Had she received his letter? Did she think it was too forward? Or worse, had she forgotten about him entirely? One crisp autumn morning, as Daniel sat at his desk reviewing reports, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, but something told him to answer it. "Hello?" he said cautiously. "Good morning, Mr. Harper," came a familiar voice, calm, steady, and unmistakably Evelyn Carter's. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Mrs. Carter, no, this is perfect timing. How are you?" "I'm doing well, thank you," she replied warmly. "I wanted to let you know that I received your letter. It touched me deeply." Relief washed over Daniel, followed by a wave of gratitude. "I wasn't sure if you get it," he admitted. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done for me." "You're very welcome," she said softly. "But I must admit, I didn't do much. You were the one who seized the opportunity I presented. That takes courage and determination." Her words filled Daniel with pride, but they also reminded him of how much he still had to learn. "That's why I wrote to you," he explained. "I want to understand more, not just about what happened in Chicago, but about how you saw potential in me when no one else did. I'd love to hear your story, if you're willing to share it." There was a pause on the other end, as if Mrs. Carter were considering his request. "You sound sincere, Daniel," she said finally. "And perhaps it's time I shared some lessons I've learned along the way. If you're free next week, I'd like to invite you to my office. We can talk then." Daniel's eyes widened in surprise. "Your office? Of course, I'd be honored. Thank you so much." They arranged a date and time before ending the call, leaving Daniel buzzing with anticipation. He spent the rest of the day replaying their conversation in his mind, imagining what it would be like to meet her again, not as a stranger at an airport, but as someone who had earned her trust. The following week, Daniel arrived at the address Mrs. Carter had given him, a sleek high-rise building in the heart of downtown Chicago. The lobby was elegant, with marble floors and walls lined with photographs of iconic moments in aviation history. As he approached the reception desk, he noticed a plaque bearing the name Skylink Global Headquarters. This was it. The company Evelyn Carter had built from scratch. "Good afternoon," Daniel said to the receptionist. "I'm here to see Mrs. Carter." The receptionist nodded politely. "She's expecting you. Please take the elevator to the top floor." When the elevator doors opened, Daniel stepped into a spacious executive suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city skyline, and the decor was tasteful, yet understated. A young assistant greeted him and led him to a private office where Mrs. Carter waited. She looked exactly as he remembered her, elegant, composed, and radiating quiet strength. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and her piercing blue eyes sparkled with intelligence. She rose from her chair and extended her hand with a warm smile. "Welcome, Daniel," she said. "Thank you for coming." "It's an honor to be here," he replied, shaking her hand firmly. "This place is incredible." Mrs. Carter chuckled softly. "It's grown quite a bit since I started it all those years ago. But enough about that. Let's sit down and talk." They settled into comfortable chairs by the window, cups of tea steaming on the table between them. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the city below. Then Mrs. Carter leaned forward slightly, her expression thoughtful. "You asked about my story," she began. "Well, it's not particularly unique. Like many people, I faced challenges early in life. My family struggled financially, and opportunities were scarce. But I believed in the power of hard work and perseverance. When I entered the aviation industry, it was dominated by men who doubted women could succeed in such a competitive field. I chose to prove them wrong." Daniel listened intently, captivated by her words. "What made you decide to start Skylink?" "A Combination of frustration and vision, she admitted. At the time, air travel was inefficient and inaccessible to most people. I saw an opportunity to create a better system, one that prioritized customer service, innovation, and affordability. It wasn't easy, of course. There were countless setbacks, sleepless nights, and moments when I questioned whether I was cut out for this kind of responsibility. But every challenge taught me something valuable. Her humility struck Daniel. Here was a woman who had achieved extraordinary success, yet she spoke of her journey with modesty and gratitude. "How did you stay motivated?" he asked. "I surrounded myself with good people," she replied simply. "People who believed in the same vision I did. And I reminded myself why I started, to make a difference, however small. That purpose kept me going, even when things seemed impossible." Daniel nodded, absorbing her wisdom. "Do you ever regret stepping away from the company?" Mrs. Carter smiled wistfully. "Not for a second. Every chapter of life has its purpose. I may not run Skylink anymore, but I still care deeply about its mission and about helping others achieve their goals." "Which brings me back to you, Daniel." He blinked, surprised. "Me?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, ambitious, driven, and eager to prove yourself. But you also possess qualities I admire: kindness, humility, and a willingness to adapt. Those traits will carry you far, provided you nurture them." Her words resonated deeply with Daniel. For so long he had focused solely on climbing the corporate ladder, often at the expense of personal connections and self-reflection. Meeting Mrs. Carter had changed that perspective, teaching him that true success wasn't just about numbers or titles. It was about making an impact and staying true to oneself. "What advice would you give someone like me?" he asked earnestly. "First, always prioritize integrity over shortcuts," she advised. "In business and in life, your reputation is everything. Second, don't be afraid to ask for help. No one succeeds alone. We all need mentors, friends, and allies along the way. And finally, remember that failure isn't the end. It's merely a stepping stone to growth." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. Her guidance was simple yet profound, a roadmap for navigating the complexities of ambition and adversity. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I won't forget this." Mrs. Carter reached across the table, patting his hand gently. "I have faith in you, Daniel. Use this moment to build something meaningful, not just for yourself, but for others. That's how legacies are made." As their meeting drew to a close, Daniel realized he wasn't just leaving with advice. He was leaving with a renewed sense of purpose, a desire to lead with empathy, innovate with intention, and inspire those around him. Evelyn Carter had given him more than a second chance. She had shown him the kind of person he could become. Back at work the next day, Daniel found himself approaching tasks with fresh enthusiasm. He reached out to colleagues he hadn't spoken to in months, offering support and collaboration. He spent extra time mentoring interns, sharing insights he had gained from his own experiences. Slowly but surely, his actions began to ripple through the company, fostering a culture of teamwork and mutual respect. And though he knew he might never fully repay Mrs. Carter for her generosity, he vowed to pay it forward, to be the kind of person who recognized potential in others and gave them the tools to succeed. Because sometimes the smallest gestures, a helping hand, a word of encouragement, or a leap of faith, could change lives in ways no one ever expected. Years passed, and Daniel Harper's life transformed in ways he could never have predicted. The lessons Evelyn Carter had shared with him became the foundation of his career and personal growth. He climbed the ranks within his company, earning promotions not just for his results but for his leadership style, empathetic, collaborative, and forward-thinking. His colleagues admired him not only for his achievements, but for the way he lifted others up, encouraging them to reach their full potential. Daniel kept in touch with Mrs. Carter over the years, exchanging occasional emails and phone calls. Each conversation left him inspired, reminding him to stay grounded despite his success. Though their meetings were infrequent, their bond remained strong, a testament to the impact one person can have on another's life. One evening, Daniel received an unexpected invitation in the mail. It was an elegant card embossed with gold lettering, inviting him to a gala celebrating Evelyn Carter's legacy. Below her name was a brief note handwritten in her unmistakable script. "I hope you'll join me for this special occasion. Your presence would mean the world." Daniel felt a surge of pride and gratitude as he read the note. This wasn't just any event. It was a tribute to a woman who had shaped industries, inspired generations, and touched countless lives. And somehow, she wanted him there. The night of the gala arrived, and Daniel dressed carefully in a tailored suit, feeling both excited and nervous. The venue was a grand ballroom filled with shimmering chandeliers and soft classical music. Guests mingled under twinkling lights, their conversations buzzing with admiration for Evelyn Carter. Industry leaders, philanthropists, and innovators from around the globe had gathered to honor her contributions to aviation and beyond. As Daniel entered the room, he spotted Mrs. Carter seated at the center table, surrounded by friends and admirers. She looked radiant, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo, her eyes sparkling with joy. When she noticed him approaching, her face lit up with a warm smile. "Daniel," she exclaimed, rising to greet him. "Thank you for coming." "It's an honor to be here," Daniel replied, shaking her hand before leaning in to give her a gentle hug. "You look amazing," she chuckled softly. "Flattery will get you everywhere, young man. But seriously, I'm so glad you made it." They spent a few moments catching up, reminiscing about their first meeting at the airport and how much had changed since then. Before long, the host took the stage to begin the program. As speeches unfolded, Daniel listened intently, learning even more about Evelyn Carter's remarkable journey. Speakers praised her vision, resilience, and generosity, painting a picture of a woman who had dedicated her life to improving the world. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, a request Evelyn herself had insisted upon, he stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding. The audience turned their attention to him, their expressions curious yet expectant. Taking a deep breath, he began. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Harper, and I stand here tonight not as a colleague or business partner of Evelyn Carter, but as someone whose life she changed forever." A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd, and Daniel smiled nervously before continuing. "Several years ago, I missed a flight because I stopped to help an elderly woman at the airport. That woman was Evelyn Carter. At the time, I thought my day had been ruined. Little did I know it was the beginning of a journey that would redefine my understanding of kindness, opportunity, and purpose." He paused, glancing toward Evelyn, who watched him with a proud smile. "Evelyn didn't just give me advice or open doors for me. She taught me to see challenges as chances to grow, to lead with compassion, and to believe in the power of human connection. Because of her, I learned that success isn't measured by titles or profits. It's measured by the lives we touch and the legacies we leave behind." The room grew quiet, every eye fixed on Daniel as he spoke. "Tonight, we celebrate Evelyn Carter's incredible accomplishments. But more than that, we celebrate the values she embodies: integrity, humility, and a relentless commitment to helping others. She has shown us that true greatness lies not in what we achieve for ourselves, but in what we do for others." Applause erupted as Daniel concluded his speech, the sound echoing through the ballroom like waves crashing against a shore. He returned to his seat, feeling a mix of relief and fulfillment. Evelyn leaned close, her voice soft, but filled with emotion. "That was beautiful, Daniel," she said. "Thank you for sharing your story, and for reminding me why I started this journey in the first place." Tears glistened in her eyes, and Daniel realized she wasn't just thanking him for the speech. She was expressing gratitude for the mutual respect and friendship they had built over the years, a bond forged by serendipity and strengthened by shared experiences. After the formalities ended, guests enjoyed dinner and dancing, laughter filling the air as old friends reunited and new connections formed. Daniel found himself reflecting on how far he'd come since that fateful day at the airport. What had seemed like a setback, a missed flight, a delayed meeting, had turned out to be the catalyst for everything good in his life. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Daniel approached Evelyn once more. "Do you remember what you told me that day?" he asked. "About how life rewards those who take detours?" She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, I do." "Do you think it's true?" "I know it's true," Daniel replied with conviction. "Because of you, I've learned to embrace the unexpected twists and turns. They've led me to places I never dreamed possible." Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but meaningful. "Then I consider my work here complete," she said with a smile. "Remember, Daniel, the best journeys are those that bring people together." As they stood side by side, watching the final dances of the evening, Daniel felt a profound sense of peace. Evelyn Carter had given him more than opportunities or advice. She had shown him the importance of paying it forward. Her legacy wasn't just in the companies she built or the awards she received. It was in the countless lives she had touched, including his own. And though the night would eventually end, Daniel knew its impact would last a lifetime. For in honoring Evelyn Carter, he had also honored the lessons she had taught him: to lead with kindness, to trust in the unknown, and to cherish the moments that remind us of our shared humanity. As the clock struck midnight, marking the close of the gala, Daniel raised a glass in silent tribute, not just to Evelyn but to the endless possibilities that arise when we choose to embrace life's detours.